Hey guys, welcome to the Babbling Pastor Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Michael, and this is the other host.
I don't. Mine isn't long enough to. Oh, I could do the whole instead of just okay. Robert.
Robert. It's a hard T on the end. Robert. I thought you were gonna go like Roberto, but you took it in a different. I didn't expect it.
I went back to like 8th grade or 9th grade French, dude. You remember?
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
Or je ne sais pas. Je ne sais pas. Je ne sais pas.
Yeah,
That is the only thing. I think I've told this story before. The only reason I know je ne sais pas is because in French it is I do not know. And if you wrote je ne sais pas on one of the questions, it was a free, you didn't get it wrong because
nice.
In my logic of, let's just say 8th grade, which I'm sure, I don't know what grade it was. I once wrote je ne sais pas on all of the answers, and she told me I couldn't do that. That didn't count. And so, but that was my logic. Yeah. I failed French, by the way.
I think what Michael wants me to say is je m'appelle Rob.
Oh, well, I do know that my name is Rob. Yeah. I used to know where's the bathroom because I felt like that was a fairly important thing to know. I didn't say where's the food. I didn't memorize that one because that seems important too. But the bathroom in my mind at the time was pretty high up on things I needed to know how to get to. So there's that. Hey guys, welcome to the Babbling Pastor Podcast. This is not
where we babble.
Yeah, clearly. So here we go on the ever expansive universe of X. And our journeys through it. We are going through and reacting and discussing content. As you know, welcome to 2025. Today, we're going to do that again. I feel like before I switch over, I need to know, do you want to give commentary on sort of the background of this, or do we just want to watch it and then go into it?
So this, I will say that this came out conveniently, I think, for some people, right before all of the LA fires and stuff. And so it's been used, in some ways there's weight to it, how it's been used. But then in other ways it's like, okay, I don't know. I think we're just going to have to jump into it and hear what is being said, and just react to it. I'm sure this is a video that both of us have seen. It's very popular.
Yeah.
Lots of people have seen it. So
I'll be honest with you. At first I thought it was satire. I'm just going to let you know right out the gate. When I first saw it, I thought it was an SNL skit at first. I really did, but it's not. So here we go. Let me go over to the screen. Let's push the play button. 25 seconds. It's super short, guys. It's super short. Here we go. Oh. Hold on. I don't have here. I got to rewind it again.
It actually makes more sense if you can't hear it. So.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
It's actually a good video if you can't hear what's being said. Oh, I guess there are captions, so never mind.
All right, here we go.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire. You want to see.
Okay, so that was obviously a very short video. Who they said who this was, right? It's a fire chief of. I think she's the video.
I think that she's second in command.
Okay.
I don't know. Either way.
Yeah. Either way.
If this was only a fireman, it doesn't matter to some degree.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got some thoughts. I clearly have some thoughts. But what do you think? What do you think? Or you want me to start? Because you sent this one.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
We can, because we both have thoughts, I'm sure.
So one of the things that sticks out immediately, was this. If you are in a emergency situation, you want somebody to show up that looks like you because it gives you ease. That's a very interesting beginning for me, because I don't really care. Like if I like, let's just say that if I am in a car wreck, I could care less who gets me out of that situation as long as I get out of that situation. Like if you are able to save my life, I do not care who you are. I just need my life saved. That was the first thing that kind of pops out. The second thing is are you strong enough to carry my husband out of a fire? If he's in a fire, he got himself in the situation. It's a real interesting comment to be made.
Yeah.
In that situation. I mean, there is, man, there's a lot you could delve into there in regards to just basic job qualifications, right? I mean, there's, for example, I know you've worked in the oil field before, so I'm sure there were qualifications there. In my job, there are certain weight qualifications. You have to be able to lift so much. You have to be able to carry so much. You have to be able to, go up and out of up and down stairs, in and out of trucks. Like there's just certain things that if you can't do those things, you just can't do the job. Like that's just the reality of the situation. They do have some like workarounds if there's certain disabilities that you may have. There are some workarounds, but there are some jobs that you're just not going to be able to do it. Like you just aren't. And so that's the other thing that kind of comes into mind here, which I'm sure we'll come around to. I'm not going to mention it now because I want to hear your thoughts on it. There is a very interesting intersection of Christian thought and how we interact with these beliefs too. But that's my first just off the top of my head thought, apart from anything necessarily biblical. The first two thoughts are, I don't care who saves me as long as you save me. And some jobs do have qualifications, and those are not bad to have those.
Yeah, I think I mean the things that stood out to me most when I first saw that and after I got off the floor again were kind of what you already pointed out. Like the two main things that are being said there that are kind of like, are coughing. And so that's the first thing. Secondly, when she talks about someone who looks like you and that bringing comfort, like if by that you mean a human and not a dog, sure, that makes sense. If you think even for a moment that in the midst of a fire, where you're really concerned about losing your life, so if think about first of all the implications of what she said. If what she's saying, or the implication is, if I'm in a house fire, I might die. I'm worried about this. Okay. And an African American gentleman or a Hispanic person comes in to save me, I'm going to be less comfortable than if it was a white dude. That by implication, that's what is being said. Now I know that typically when folks like this talk like this, they mean it the other way, right? If it's just a white guy, well, that's not going to bring much comfort. But the looks like you thing is irrelevant and to even say. And again, I might be wrong about the position of this person within the fire department. I don't know. Either way, it is.
Okay,
again,
so it looks like LAFD Assistant Chief is her title.
Okay, yeah. So the assistant chief, but point being, even if this person is a just a firefighter on the ground, that to me is a disqualifying comment for the job. An even more disqualifying comment is, yes, your job is to put fires out. However, part of that job, frankly, probably the biggest part of that job, is saving lives. And so if the attitude is even remotely, well, you got yourself into this, so I mean, physical requirements aside, right? If that's the attitude, it's like, uh, you not only should you not be a firefighter, you probably shouldn't you shouldn't work in daycare. You shouldn't, like, there are a host of things that you probably ought
You
not to do.
expect me to get that kid out of the toilet? He got himself in the toilet. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know what you want me to do
You
about
know
it.
what? I realized that I watched him drown in the pool. Okay. And you can frown on me for that. But, like, at the end of the day, kid jumped in there. You know what I'm
He
saying?
got himself
And
in the pool.
I didn't want to get all wet. These are good clothes. So, like that's the
You're
same
literally the
logic.
lifeguard. Well, yeah, but what do you want me to do?
Yeah, it's the same logic. And then I think just the from the LA fireman or firefighter thing in general, right? Pete Hegseth. For those of you who don't know who that is, he's likely, and maybe by the time this comes out, he is. I don't know, but he's pretty likely going to be the new Secretary of Defense, and he's gotten into some. Uh, uh, Certainly, there are
Hot
lots of things
water,
that
as
people
it were.
attack him for sure. But part of the hot water that he's been in with some folks is his stance on women in combat situations. And I understand that upsets people. But first of all, like, I don't think that it's biblical in general, just because of the role of men and women. I think that if there's fighting to do, like legit combat fighting to do, it ought to be the men who stand in the way of for the defense of our country. It's just the honorable thing for men to do. So there's a biblical principle there, I think, with gender roles and stuff. But if we're just coming at it, even if we're just coming at it from a secular whatever view and a practical view, um, the idea ought to be, it ought not, let me say it that way, it ought not to be that we need equality, in the sense that we need equal amounts of men and women in these roles. We need to give women a shot. And so what the military has done is lowered the standards so that women can meet them. Right now, while that sounds really wonderful and happy and fluffy, that is not good. That's not good, because at the end of the day, like you said when you first started talking about it, there's a reality behind it. There's a there is a you ought to be able to do this. If you can't carry these 2 ammo cans full of things to a required destination, if you can't put your buddy over your shoulder, and this is the but when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, there was being introduced at the time what was called the CFT, the combat fitness test. And it was a whole bunch of, like, not instead of the PFT, which was just running and pull-ups and crunches or whatever, sit-ups or whatever, they introduced a combat fitness test, which is kind of like some of the things I described: ammo can run, and the fireman's carry, and the ironically, and so essentially you had to do things that you might have to do in combat, right? Physically in combat. And so I think that we're laughably kidding ourselves if we think that some of these roles, that it's okay for standards to be lowered to include all people, right? Would you lower the standards of firefighting so that a female 12-year-old could participate, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, because you still have to perform the duties of a firefighter, which includes saving lives. Even it includes people who have put themselves in terrible situations, right? Even if that's true, Your job is to go rescue that person. And if you can't do that, quit.
Yeah. Well, and I think this goes back to, so let's I want to kind of wrap this around and tie it in. I think this goes back to the same, whenever you don't recognize that there are distinct differences. There are just differences. Now, I haven't heard Pete, whatever you said his last name was. I don't think I've heard his argumentation. But it sounds like, to me at least, he recognizes that there are differences in regards to the abilities, mentality between men and women. Like, there's just is. Like, there are realities that not just physically, but I think mentally as well. I mean, you have some as far as empathy goes in some cases, as far as perseverance goes in some other cases. Like it depends on the situation you're in, but there are women that excel in particular situations, and then there are men that excel in other particular situations. And that is good. There was a tweet, I wish I had it, that pulled up. It was from this guy. He said he was outside snowball fighting with his kids, and his in the tweet is his boy was like 8, and he said he just goes out there and he just pegs him, and this kid starts crying and runs away and hides, and the dad, the next time, like a couple minutes later, he gets, somebody gets him in the face, and he just laughs and roars and like goes back at it. And the neighbor girl was over there with him, and his son comes back out, and he sees his dad take the snowball to the face and just take it and keep going. And there were like dual lessons that he said was there. One, he told his son, you don't cry in front of girls. And two, like, you take it and just keep going. And there, as you can imagine, the comments were very interesting on the reply to this particular individual. But his point was kind of what we're talking about. Like, there's a reality that you have to build that in to people. Like, they need, like, so little boys need the example of, like, you don't just run from a fight and you don't go cry in a corner. Like, you man up and you go do what you need to do. The reason that you're able to do that, though, is because little boys have the wherewithal to do that. They just need to be shown that. And so within the situation we're talking about, there are situations, and I don't know, you could probably speak to this better than I could, but I'm sure, especially in combat situations, there is typically, men seem to have more of a fight than a flight response. And I would say in situations that I've seen, in most situations, women are more empathetic and therefore don't necessarily. I mean, there are obviously some ghetto ladies that I know that would jump in, but in general, that's not the case. And so what you have is, as a general rule,
we're gonna get in trouble for that.
It's whatever. Men are more combative in general.
Yeah.
And I'll just let me just double down on that comment. Most of those ladies that I know that would jump in, right, do so because they have seen that activity replicated in front of them, usually by men, and they're just imitating it. And so it's one of those things where all they know to do is fight, and that's what they do. And so I've doubled down on it. You can cancel me and unsubscribe if you'd like. But the idea, luckily, none of my income is based on this at all. So
Joke's on you.
Yeah, joke's on you. I think there is a distinctive difference, and we see it in Scripture. People don't like the passage, but Peter is talking about, when he's talking about men and women, he mentions the weaker vessel. You could go into a whole thing on that, but the general idea, as we see through the Scriptures, is that men lead. They're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones that are doing the fighting. They're the ones that are protecting. That doesn't mean that women can't do things. Clearly, for example, my wife is far more empathetic than I am. Just is. And that's natural. She's far more caring than I am. In a lot of situations, she has more perseverance than I do in regards to, like if a kid, not just our kids, but just a kid in general, just won't do something, I'm just like, I don't care. Like, you're doing it. And then there's a lot more, we're built differently. And I think it comes across in a very interesting way in this video, because what this video really says is that, oh, well, everything needs to be equal, right? That last slide is only 5% of firefighters are women. I don't care. Like, that makes no difference to me. Are you effective in the job? And why does that matter in the first place? I think what begins to happen, and we've seen this in the church as well, especially with the egalitarianism. There was an interview I saw the other day that Ruslan did with a Wesleyan pastor, and he asked him about women.
Strategic plan to
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. And he was talking about how many percentage-wise do you think Wesleyan churches have that are women pastors? And this guy was, kind of bemoaning the reality that only small church pastors are basically women, because large churches just still haven't adopted the idea that women should be elders even within the Wesleyan church. And he was, mourning over the reality that oh, well, there's still this stigma. And the reality is, I think we all know that. There's just, guys are going to be, for better or worse, sometimes the balance isn't good, but are going to be more in this needs to get done, this task needs to be accomplished, here's how we're going to do it. And by and large, women are going to be more empathetic and do oh, well, we need to take care of these people, but because you're doing that, these other tasks aren't getting done. And so that's my big, long, roundabout way of being canceled today, of saying that there's a difference. And that difference is evident. And when you try to ignore it, it still pops its head up. And when you try to ignore it more, then you try to do what basically this video is doing, in being well, it doesn't really matter. Why do you care? It needs to be fair. And you're well, you're just ignoring what's flatly in front of you. If you, as a firefighter, can't carry somebody out of a fire, you can't do the job. That's all there is.
Get out of here. Yeah.
So I think what this is really a cultural ramification of something that the church has neglected and dropped the ball on.
Ouch. Yeah, I completely agree. So I think that is, so first of all, so I can get it out of my mouth, it is hilarious that you mentioned the particular example that you gave, where you're talking about Christina is better at empathy and patience, particularly with kids and whatever. Someone's not listening, well, then it's you're going to do it. Doesn't matter. It's hilarious because my wife is going to visit her dad today, actually, as we're recording this. And our boys had the option to stay or go. And I mean, they still have school to do. Our boys are homeschooled. If you don't know, we're not tearing them out of school for anything. And so Wyatt, my youngest, is he's going to go with mom. And he's going to go with mom. I think his actual reason was because the other option is he has to do school under me. And it would be a little bit more like being in Marine Corps recruit training than sitting under a loving mother who, and at the end of the day, he's probably going to be just as smart either way. But yeah, I don't by nature put up with the crap, right? And he doesn't like that. So he took the easy way. He's going with mom, but
yeah. Well, to that point, and just, I mean, I know the whole, the experiences that we're talking about are funny, but also I've noticed in situations in which the man isn't acting like a man, right? Isn't this is what's going to get done. This is what we're doing. This is how I'm leading. When you have a man advocating that and acting effeminate in the regards to not doing that, one of two things happens in my experience that I've seen. One, you have, and again, this has biblical implications, and I'll get to this. One, you have either the wife has to become as manly as she can. I mean, she becomes the dictator, but then that doesn't work out because it's now her position within the whole system is thrown out of whack, because now who do you go to for caring and I mean, you go to the effeminate dude, but the effeminate dude still isn't a replacement for the mom. And so now you have two people in this relationship. Neither one of them now are able to act as they should for a healthy, balanced family. And now you have kids that don't know how they're usually not well disciplined. They're usually not well behaved. They're usually fairly lost in life because they don't have examples of what to do, because the man in the relationship isn't acting like a man. And now the woman in the relationship can't really be all that she is meant to be, because she's trying to pick up both parts of the balance, and she can't do both of those things. Which is why, for example, most of the time, if you have fatherless homes, you have little boys that will go to one of two extremes. They'll be incredibly angry and violent because they're trying to make up the difference of not having that, or they're really, really effeminate, and they cry a lot. They don't know how to handle emotions. They're just all over the place. And so, like, that, as much as it is funny, right, that like both of our kids, my daughter said the same thing. She does not want to be homeschooled by me because that's not fun. It's not fun. Mom goes on road trips and makes it fun and enjoyable, and dad's like, just do it. And so, like, that's just the reality of it. And so I think, again, that comes back to when we see in the scriptures, in the Old Testament, you have these patriarchs that are leading their families that are looked to as like, if you are not giving us direction, we don't know what we're doing. Like, that is their job. And then we get to the New Testament and you have Paul set this example up. I'm sorry, hold on. I need a drink. You have Paul set this example up in Ephesians 5 of like, hey, you are, as the husband, you are an example of Christ in the church. And that means you're supposed to be sacrificing. You're supposed to be leading. You're supposed to be the one that is taking the hits. And when that is out of balance, maybe the effects aren't wide reaching, but they're still there. I mean, for sure. And more concerning outside of the home in the church, if people can say this isn't the case as much as they want, but when you have churches that are led incorrectly by women, yeah, they're really caring and they're really empathetic churches, and they're really, they help a lot of people, but there's no backbone in them at all. Mm-hmm. It is a boneless corpse is what it is. Big sack of meat. Because there's just, women naturally do not have the gusto to proclaim the gospel loudly and firmly, and like here's the example. I'm sorry, that example here, let me go back. That's what a manly woman looks like, and that's not what a woman's supposed to look like. So whenever I'm just, again, of all the episodes, Rob, this is the one that's going to make all the cancellation. This is the canceling one. All right. This is going to be the one. Thanks for running my YouTube career. What we have when you neglect what Scripture clearly teaches on men and women, you have a society that doesn't know how to function. And because that affects the home and the church, you have a home that doesn't function well, does not produce people that know how to function as they ought. And then you have a church that is not only dealing with those people and trying to disciple them, but you have a broken system in the church that isn't dealing with them properly because the church structure itself is all screwed up. And so you have what you do end with, what seems to be sort of at least the observational anecdotal case that I can make currently right now, is you have a lot of people that seem like they care a lot, but don't know what to care about. And so everything's an issue, everything's a problem, everyone needs hugged, but no one has any direction. And so we all just cry and wonder who's going to save us. And there's no answer for that. Because, any man that would try to lead biblically is then seen as toxic. And so now it's like, well, we know we have a problem, but you are clearly not the solution. And then, everybody burns down in a building because you got yourself there. What do you want me to do about it?
Yeah, I think, there certainly, we could talk about gender roles from a biblical Christian standpoint for several episodes of this podcast. And I think we could do that because the world around us, and even unfortunately amongst a lot of church people, have so butchered those roles as the scripture portrays them, that in some instances they're just not even recognizable. And unfortunately, even worse than that, like there are churches and things that have there are churches that have, I think, capitulated with the culture. There's my juicy word for the day. Capitulated. Yeah, have capitulated with the culture and blended in to the point that it's obvious to the real Christian. Like, this doesn't make any sense. This is not. All you have to do is follow woke preacher clips or Protestia on X for an hour, and you'll see several examples of this kind of thing, right? Where the church has mixed up gender roles, and for the Christian who's educated a little bit, who's been a Christian for a minute, who sees things through a biblical worldview, you look at these and go, yeah, that's obviously not Christian. However, I think that the more dangerous thing as far as the church is concerned is that I think that feminism, toxic femininity, let's say, I think has crept into. That's what they think. I think that it's crept into the church in many ways that are unrecognized by the typical Christian, because we have grown up in it. I think that feminism is part of why men view it as feminine to sing along in church. I think that that's a problem that happens in a lot of churches. You got guys who are sitting back while their wives sing. And I noticed this even in our own church, and I've talked about it publicly, that there's, like when the Red Sea crossing happens, right? And they get to the other side of it. What happens? Moses, like the men of Israel, sing. And certainly there probably were women that sang as well, but the men led the worship singing in that moment and sang. And David is an example, and Paul calling the congregation in general to sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs and all of this. There's all of the evidence in Scripture points to this ought to be like everything else, men and women joining together to sing praises to God. And if we're doing that, we ought to be doing it with gusto, and not like, I don't want Jim to hear me, we get like all embarrassed and stuff. Right. And I think that is feminism within the church. I also think that some of that particular, then this is just one example that I'm talking about, and we could talk about several. But I think that another place that you see feminism within the church, particularly within worship music, a lot of times, that also affects men wanting to sing along is when your worship music lyrically and musically is more like a love song than it is like a worship song.
Like most of the songs that were at that teen camp.
Boom. Yeah. Yeah. When it's meant to be emotional, well, yeah, guys are emotional too. All right. But when guys get emotional, generally speaking, when men get emotional, the most common emotions amongst men cause wars and cause them to be won or lost. And we one of the emotional moments for a man is getting angry at things, or like,
or
and
passionate. Yeah,
yeah,
passionate.
yeah, and hopefully righteous anger when that happens. But certainly, um, like the emotions are still a thing, but they're certainly different. The way that the types of emotions that are more prevalent uh, are very gender based, um, amongst the two genders that are recognized by our government now. And
So weird that had to be a statement that was made, but yeah.
yeah, pretty dumb, really, that it had to go there. But yeah, like I think that that the Christian church has a real problem when it comes to this. I think that we can laugh at the fire department all we want, but as long as there's okay, it's my turn to get canceled. Okay, as long as there's a female preaching to the male leaders of the free world, um, and all of the men who would have been in attendance at the presidential whatever it was, like as long as we have things like that, as long as we have female elders in churches, as long as we try to compromise that and call them ministers, and it's the same thing, like as long as we're doing stuff like that, I mean, we're not different than this fire department.
Yeah. Wow, you're right. This episode, man, I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see, waiting to see what will happen, man, in the comment section. So here's yeah, this will be my last thing. Something that stuck out there that you said was men specifically sitting back and not singing during just congregational song. I think it goes back to that tweet about the snowball. That little boy had to see his dad take a hit and be cool with it, to take the hit and be cool with it. And so I think that is also what in congregational time is also being unpurposely conveyed at times. What you observe is what you just assume to be true. That's in everything. That's why what you see in a cartoon, if a kid sees in a cartoon, they just assume it's normal, right? I mean, that's what I see. That's the truth. That's what happens. Cool. And and so if your sons are in church and not seeing you sing, not seeing you pay attention, not seeing you be engaged, then okay, well, why should I? Same thing if your daughters are in congregation and they're not seeing their moms do the same, that's what they're learning. If they're not seeing their mom, for example, even within a household, if they don't see their mom speak kindly of their father, they have no example to what that looks like later in their relationships. If they don't see if a boy doesn't see his dad loving on his wife, taking care of his wife, sacrificing for her, why should he do that later? It's not why you're teaching by. You can tell him. That goes back to the episode we talked about, downloading information versus actually sanctifying change. I could tell you to do something, but you're watching what I'm doing far more than what I'm telling you to do. Yeah. And so I think that's the same thing here. The church, if the church really wants to change culture, the real way that's going to happen is lead in the way that we want that. Again, I think laws are good. Laws go as far as they can go, though. And so if you really want a change in a people, they need to see that the change that you are saying is better actually is better. And so this is what people talk about this all the time. Whenever church talks about marriage and the sanctity of it, and they'll point to divorce statistics among Christians all the time. Why? Because it demonstrates that you really don't care. You don't, because you're getting divorced more or equally to everybody else. And so if you want to say, I care about this thing, you need to demonstrate that you care about this thing. And so I think, again, what you said really is the reality of the situation, that if we want to say that the scriptural way of running a home is the way to do it, but you don't do it that way, what in the world, bro? If you want to say that leaders are supposed to be this way, but you don't have leaders that operate this way, what's up? And so I think at the end of the day, again, like you said, we can laugh at this video all we want. I mean, again, I thought it was an SNL skit, but the reason that it is like a thing is because the church dropped the ball first. It's just what happened.
Yeah.
And you can elect as many people as you want to elect. You can make as many laws as you want to make. But if the church isn't leading in it first, it doesn't matter. The laws are just a stopgap temporarily. They're a Band-Aid on a gun wound. It'll do a minute. It'll do something for a minute. We both laugh. Like the fact that the president had to say there are only two genders, bro. Like that's an asinine statement 10 years ago. Like nobody would even make that. Would be a joke. That would be a joke 10 years ago. But the fact is, we've dropped the ball, and so now that is seen as a serious statement, a seriously offensive one to some people. And so it's just like, I mean, at the end of the day, it begins at the church, and it begins with Christians living Christian principles. And if we don't do that, the reality is nothing's going to change. So that's my last statement. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know why it came into my mind, but I'm just picturing like George Washington showing up in a DeLorean one day and watching the inauguration and all of the festivities and like what he would be thinking, what he would be going through his head if the first 5 or 6 presidents or whatever.
He goes back. He's like, boys, we got to do something. We got to write something in here.
Yeah.
We got to.
Yeah. I guess we need to say this I don't know why, but it's come so far.
He's just like, this was a bad idea. Give it back to England. Give it back to England. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, it's I think that one of the lessons that so if I were before my congregation having this conversation, right? Do you remember the episode when we were talking about that quote and the context of congregation and that kind of thing? That like your particular context matters as to what you'll preach, how you'll preach it, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think like if one of the wow moments to a biblical congregation in my setting that's very conservative, Republican, right wing, like we're about 3 steps away from starting a militia. Like that's kind of where I live, right? And
FBI agent takes some notes. Okay.
Well, the new FBI, I suppose, will probably be on board with that. But I think that given my particular context, one of the things that would come from my mouth if I'm talking about this and in conversation about this particular video is that, look, the church isn't any different. And here's why. It looks different. It's more camouflaged to the Christian because it's how we've grown up. It's what we've grown up into. It's all around us. But when you have 15 women's Bible studies and you can't get men to come to one, or you can't get men to come to, whatever 2 things or something like that. When you have a church that has women bringing their children and men sitting home to watch the game, when you have those kinds of things going on, well, of course the gender roles are going to be all screwed up because you got the guy sitting at home, worthless, not doing his job, not leading his family, not training his children in the way that they should go. And you have the woman who is assuming his role in leading the family, caring for the spiritual nourishment of the children, working on her own spiritual nourishment, leading her husband spiritually. It's a complete joke. So men like that need to man up and be men and stuff, right? And give your wife an avenue to follow you. Like, she shouldn't have to be Deborah. That's stupid, right? Like, and that was the point of that story. That is a picture of you not being a man, and certainly then not a godly one. So there's that.
Yeah, isn't I think that she even says, she's like, yeah, but you're not going to get the glory for any of this. Like, yeah.
Right. She even makes the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is dumb, right? I mean, I'll do it, but it ought to be you.
Yeah. It needs to happen, but I'm not the one that should be doing this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool, guys. Well, thank you. If you made it this far,
you should just call this. You should call this episode canceled or something like that.
Yeah. That'll probably be the title. I'm done after this, or I don't know.
The last Babbling Pastors podcast.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I've not been kicked out.
Run.
I've not been kicked out of the Wesleyan Church yet, but maybe this will do it. So, guys, appreciate you listening this far. If you made it 46 minutes in, dudes, appreciate it.
A long
one. But hey, we are not going to leave you hopeless. If you'd like to leave a like. If you'd like to comment, which I'm sure you probably already have one way or the other. And if you are still here, I feel like you need to subscribe, because you either like this content or you want to hate watch this content. But either way, hit that subscribe button. We'll talk to you next time. Here's the hope at the end. I think you're going to, we started with this, and I need to leave you on a lighthearted. Here's our theme song. Thanks for watching the Babbling Pastor Podcast. We'll talk to you later.